Okay, let's unpack this. When we talk about classic Famicom platformers, the kind of game that really, defined a generation and set the template for decades, there's one title that always sits on that pedestal. Today, we are diving deep into a true masterpiece, a legend. The 1988 family computer icon, Rockman 2, Dr. Wily no Nazo.
And we have gone through all of it, the old magazines, the development notes, everything we could find on a game that wasn't just a critical hit, it was a massive commercial peak. It sold over 1.51 million units.
Which is just staggering.
It is, especially when you think back to the first Rockman. It had a pretty slow start,
Yeah.
A much smaller audience at first.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really grapple with this brilliant paradox at the heart of the game. How did a title that was famously developed in, a frantic 3-month sprint?
Yeah, people called it an unofficial side project a lot of the time.
Right. How did that game become the undisputed standard bearer for the entire series? And how did it get that legendary status while at the same time being filled with some of the most frustrating, just infamous design flaws in gaming history?
It's the ultimate example of a high-risk, high-reward development story, isn't it?
Yeah.
For those of us who are waiting for this sequel, maybe you were lucky enough to get this cartridge for Christmas in '88. It felt like a revolution.
Oh, I can only imagine. That title screen alone.
That title screen, the art, the promise of 8 brand new, stronger robots. It was just pure console magic. It was the kind of game that made you feel like the Famicom was the best thing in the world.
Absolutely. And the story setup is so simple, but it's just so effective. Dr. Wily gets beaten in the first game by Rockman, and then, almost exactly 1 year later, he's back. He's just back with 8 new, formidable robots.
No long speeches, no convoluted plot. He's just back, faster and angrier.
And that one move expanding from the 6 bosses in the first game to 8. It's not just a number change, is it? It's the fundamental series-defining shift that we really need to break down first.
It is. It established the core blueprint for almost every single Rockman game that came after.
So let's jump right in. Let's define that new blueprint. What were the specific system innovations that Rockman 2 brought to the table that made it the foundation, not just for the series, but for the whole genre?
Well, it starts right where you said with the scale. The first game gave you a 6-stage challenge. Rockman 2 just decisively kicks that up to 8 selectable stages right from the very start.
And that doesn't just increase the playtime.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It multiplies the strategic complexity tenfold.
And the presentation of those stages was it was revolutionized. This is a huge nostalgia point for anyone who played it back then. Instead of those, slightly clunky full-body sprites of the bosses on the select screen.
From the first game, yeah.
Rockman 2 gave us those iconic, beautifully rendered faces of the bosses.
That aesthetic change was monumental. It boosted the visual appeal so much and immediately made characters like Metalman, Airman, Quickman. They felt more distinct. They felt like a genuine rogues gallery.
It gave them personality before you even started the level.
Exactly. Right from the menu screen, which is so essential if you're trying to capture the imagination of, a kid playing the game.
And crucially, that bigger roster, it naturally increased the degrees of freedom for the player. You're trying to solve the game's core puzzle, right? The optimal stage order. With 6 bosses, the weakness chain is pretty simple to figure out. With 8, that whole rock, paper, scissors dynamic becomes exponentially more complex and honestly more rewarding to solve.
And that replayability is key. Our sources confirmed that the relationship between the boss weaknesses, like the chain running from Metalman to Bubbleman to Heatman, it was intentionally designed not to be a perfect circle.
Oh, that's
Yeah, it gave players more branching paths, more options for high damage. It really encouraged you to experiment instead of just following one single fixed route. The game feels open from the second you press start.
But if there is one single item that fundamentally changed the series, we have to talk about it. The introduction of the energy can. The E-Tank.
The E-Tank, yes.
This changed everything about how you approach difficulty and survival.
The E-Tank.
Right.
The item that saved countless runs and probably prevented millions of Famicom controllers from being thrown through a TV screen.
Absolutely.
For the first time, you could stock up to 4 of these life energy recovery items and use them at any time to fully restore your health. It was a true lifeline.
And the sources point out this really fascinating little historical detail. In the instruction manual for the original Japanese release, it wasn't even called the E-Tank yet.
Is that right?
Yeah. It was just described as, the item that restores all life energy. I think it was just called an energy pack. It only officially became the energy can, or E-Can, from Rockman 3 onwards.
Huh. Well, whatever they called it, it immediately introduced this vital strategic element. I mean, in the first game, which was brutally hard, if you were low on health, your run was basically over. You
Well,
were just waiting for the game over screen.
right, you were doomed.
But now, you had a buffer. You had a safety net.
And that buffer allowed for something Japanese players call goryoshi, which
Yeah.
is sort of like brute forcing your way through a section.
Reckless rushing, yeah.
You could intentionally take these calculated risks knowing you had an E-tank waiting to bail you out if your skills just weren't quite there yet.
And that's a profound shift in design. The difficulty moved away from being purely about your reaction time and flawless platforming and more towards resource management.
It made the game so much more approachable for a wider audience, right? It let less skilled players actually see the later, more complex stages.
For sure. But the tension is still there, which is what's so brilliant. You can stock 4 of them, but using one, you have to think about it. If you pop an E-tank and then immediately miss a jump into a pit,
The worst feeling.
it's completely wasted. So you're constantly balancing this, thrill of survival against the fear of running out of your resources.
That strategic depth is just genius. You're using a resource not just to save your life right now, but as a bet against a future difficulty spike. You're facing a boss you know you can beat. You hold on to it.
But when you're facing Airman
Airman.
or one of the Wily bosses, you might need that cushion.
Yeah.
And the psychological pressure just mounts every single time you think about opening that menu.
Speaking of easing frustration, we have to celebrate the single most important quality of life improvement in the whole game. The instant death traps.
Yes, the spikes.
The original Rockman was just infamous for it. You touch a spike, a thorn, you fall in a pit, instant death. And if an enemy knocked you back onto spikes, it felt so unfair. It was just immediate frustration.
It was the absolute worst. But Rockman 2 fundamentally changed the rules. It introduced this crucial buffer, a brief moment of invincibility right after you take damage.
And that simple addition meant that if you got knocked back onto spikes while you were flashing, you didn't instantly die. You had this tiny window, maybe a second, to jump away and save yourself.
That seemingly minor change was a massive shift in gameplay design. This whole technique of damage boosting, intentionally taking a small hit to get that invincibility and pass through a death zone, it became a valid, recognized strategy for the rest of the series.
It totally reduced that feeling of, well, what the sources call unreasonableness that plagued the first game. It let you navigate stages like Airman's or Metalman's more strategically.
Right. You could be in a room full of spikes and think, okay, if I let this little enemy hit me right now, I can safely slide past that next trap. That's high-level play that was enabled by one simple tweak.
It also made the water levels a little less annoying, where your jump is massive and controlling your movement is tricky.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing that just brushing up against the spikes wasn't an instant way. Game Over made those sections feel less like a lottery and more like something you could actually plan for.
Okay, next up, the item series. The introduction of these 3 special support items, item 1, 2, and 3, which are, they're clearly the direct precursors to Rush.
The iconic robot dog from Rockman 3, yeah.
Exactly. These items used up weapon energy, but they were essential for getting through certain tricky sections or reaching hidden areas.
Which, again, it just emphasizes that shift towards resource management. You're not just using your ammo to beat enemies anymore. You're using it to traverse the level itself.
Item 1 was the simple one, the slowly rising platform for high ledges. Item 3 was the wall climbing one, which you absolutely needed for some of those huge walls in the Wily stages.
But item 2 is the real star here.
Without a doubt.
The straight-moving jet platform. The clear, direct ancestor of the rush jet we all came to depend on later. The sources even mention its speed. They called it Mach 3.
It moves so fast, just continuously burning energy until it hits a wall or runs out. And it was a literal lifesaver for skipping those agonizing platforming sections.
It gave you a real choice, didn't it? Do you spend 15 minutes trying to master the timing of those disappearing blocks?
Or do you just burn a chunk of precious weapon energy and fly right over it with item 2?
Yeah.
That choice is what makes the experience better for everyone because it caters to different skill levels.
And we absolutely cannot forget the password system. It was so unique and, honestly, ingenious.
It really was.
Instead of those long, error-prone codes you saw in Famicom RPGs, or even the coordinate system from the first Rockman, This game used that specific 5x5 grid where you placed red chits.
It was stylish, it was original, and as the sources strongly emphasize, it made transcription errors so much less likely.
Oh, I remember the pain. Trying to write down a long string of Japanese characters from the TV on a tiny piece of paper, only to find out you mixed up a 0 and an O the next day.
The grid system was nearly foolproof. It was this beautiful, minimalist piece of interface design that told you everything. Which bosses were beaten, how many E-tanks you had.
It was perfect for the simple, action-focused nature of the game.
It did have one key limitation, though. It saved your progress in your E-tanks, but your lives always reset to 3.
Right, which was fine for an action game. It made sure you couldn't just stockpile 99 lives and coast through the Wily stages. You still had to earn it every time you played.
Just a couple other quick changes. They cleaned up the life and weapon energy gauges, which set the standard for the next few games. And they wisely got rid of the score system from the first game, which was pretty pointless.
Yeah, it didn't really do anything. And what about that weird quirk with item drops?
Oh, right. The feature unique to Rockman 2. All items, life energy, weapon energy, 1 UPs, had to actually hit the ground before you could pick them up. You couldn't grab them in midair.
Such a tiny little thing, but it added this unique rhythm to collecting items that they got rid of in later games.
Yeah, it did.
So we've covered the structure, the innovations. Now let's get into the characters themselves, because this is where the genius marketing strategy really comes into play. They captured the hearts of the fans through collaboration.
Absolutely. The decision to run a boss character design contest. It was a brilliant idea. The sources say it was borrowed from the fan submission culture of the wrestling manga Kinnikuman.
That's amazing.
It was pure brilliance. It instantly brought the fans into the development process. It gave them a sense of ownership.
And they got some incredible submissions, which just shows how much passion was already building for the series. The 8 designs they chose got the Dr. Wily prize and were put right into the game.
And the best part, the designers were credited by name in the ending credits.
Not just the winners either.
Right. The sources say something like 32 or 40 runner-up designers were listed in the special thanks. That level of engagement, it just solidified the fan base. It gave the community a real stake in the franchise's creative direction. It built this immediate, deep loyalty.
It's time to meet the cast, and we have to start with the one who caused the most controversy, I guess, because of his sheer game-breaking power.
Yeah.
Metal Man, DWN.009.
Metal Man. He was Wily's first pure combat robot, designed as an upgrade to Cutman. And the trivia for him is just fantastic. He likes Frisbee, but he hates dogs.
A very specific personality trait for a killer robot.
But his weapon, the metal blade, is just. It's legendary for how unbalanced it is. We're talking about a rotating saw made of ceramical titanium.
It has a super low energy cost, just a quarter of a bar. It does incredible damage, often better than your standard buster.
And most importantly, it has 8-directional firing, and it pierces through enemies.
It just trivializes huge sections of the game. Once you realize you can fire it up, down, diagonally, and it costs almost nothing, you might as well just forget the Rockbuster exists.
It's the perfect storm of efficiency and power.
And what's truly genius about Metal Man is the developer's secret plan for his weakness. He's weak to his own weapon.
Yes, you can beat him in just 2 shots of the metal blade.
2 shots.
And the sources confirm this was a totally intentional, hidden strategy. They designed it that way to generate buzz in magazines. They knew players would find this quick kill weakness and it would spread like wildfire, getting tons of free publicity for the game. It was marketing through a design flaw.
Incredible. Okay, next up. The imposing Airman, DWN.010, the big-bodied air combat robot. Likes Menko, hates autumn leaves. This is the robot that strikes immediate fear into the heart of every beginner.
Airman's design is intentionally not humanoid, which gives him this huge menacing presence. His stage is tough, and his weapon, the air shooter, fires those 3 tornadoes diagonally up. It takes really careful timing to jump through them.
The stage and the boss were so notoriously hard that they inspired one of the great artifacts of early 2000s fan culture. The song Airman Gatosanai.
Airman can't be defeated, yeah.
That song just perfectly captures the universal struggle of fighting that one specific boss.
It wasn't just the fight, it was the whole stage. The way he uses his tornadoes, the tricky platforms, the enemies that could deflect your shots. It was a true test of timing and pattern recognition. I remember the absolute relief when I finally landed that perfect sequence of shots to beat him for the first time.
It felt like you'd leveled up as a player.
It really did.
All right, moving on to high-speed danger. Quickman, DWN.012, the Speed Maniac, a clear successor to Elecman from the first game. Likes car racing, hates turtles. He is high-speed platforming personified.
His speed is everywhere in his design. He's the only boss whose boomerang sprite actually bleeds a little bit outside the box on the boss selection screen.
Yeah.
He just defines that fast-paced encounter.
But he has this major intentional design flaw that becomes a huge tactical advantage for the player if you're using the time stopper.
That's right. Quickman is the only boss in the entire series whose defense system against the time stopper was flawed. The developers intended for the time stopper, which normally just freezes things without doing damage,
Right.
to make Quickman's internal molecules vibrate really fast, like a microwave, which actually caused him to take damage.
So using the otherwise pretty useless time stopper against Quickman is the key to beating him. It's this very specific key and lock puzzle that adds this whole other layer to weapon management.
Exactly. And finally, for this group, let's look at Woodman, DWN but 016. The gentle giant, made of special-coated cypress wood, likes mountain walking, hates natural destruction.
Woodman is the embodiment of the obvious weakness puzzle, but it's executed so well. He's made of wood, he uses the leaf shield, which is nearly impossible to break with physical attacks, but the second you realize he's made of wood,
And you have a fire weapon.
atomic fire is his glaring elemental weakness, and discovering that classic video game logic wood burns, it felt like a genuine aha moment. It rewarded you for thinking strategically about the whole roster.
He's tough enough to punish you if you just try to use the buster,
Yeah.
but easy enough to make you feel smart when you finally pull out the right tool for the job.
Which brings us perfectly to part 3, the double-edged sword of difficulty. This is where we celebrate why Rockman 2 is called a masterpiece, and also dissect the moments where that frantic 3-month development schedule caused the balance to just completely fall apart.
Let's start with the high points, the things that earned it that masterpiece title. They even printed it on the PlayStation re-release packaging. First up, strategic freedom.
The genius of the design was achieving that perfect balance. A super skilled player could, technically, clear all 8 stages and bosses with just the basic rockbuster.
But for the rest of us mortals, using the special weapons smartly made the process way easier, faster, and honestly, a lot more fun.
It satisfied both the purists who wanted the ultimate challenge and the strategic players who wanted to use the game's core weakness mechanic. That moment when you discover Metal Blade against Crashman, it's just pure satisfaction.
It validates your thinking.
Exactly. Next, the stage design itself. The sources all highlight how compact but intensely packed the stages are. They're physically short, but they are crammed with unique gimmicks. It maintains this high tempo that prevents you from getting bored. There's no wasted space.
That's so critical for that era of gaming. The difficulty relies so much on pattern memorization. The death pits, the moving blocks, the enemy placement. It just perfectly encourages that rewarding cycle of repetition leading to mastery.
You die, you know exactly why, you learn the pattern, you execute it, and the sense of accomplishment is just profound.
I remember spending whole afternoons on a single stage, feeling that, productive frustration. Every failure, you internalize the timing just a little bit better. The game was hard, but it felt fair because the challenge wasn't random. It was a memory test.
And we really have to appreciate the ending sequence. Considering that insane 3-month development cycle, that final cinematic after you beat Wily, that silent, ambiguous shot of Rockman walking home, helmet off, revealing the boy inside, it was hugely popular.
It added this sense of melancholy, of thoughtfulness, that was completely unexpected for a fast-paced action game back then. It gave the hero a depth the first game didn't quite achieve.
It really did. Okay, now for the controversial points. The parts where the rushed development really shows, leading to some massive balance problems. And we have to start with the single most game-breaking weapon, the Metal Blade.
The Metal Blade is the definition of overpowered. It fundamentally shatters the game's intended difficulty curve. We mentioned its low energy cost, the 8-directional firing, the raw damage.
But the imbalance really hits you when you just list what it's good for. It's the weakness for 3 robot masters, Clashman, Flashman, and Bubbleman.
Plus Metal Man himself.
So you can just fire it continuously in any direction, and it's the key to trivializing 4 out of the 8 main bosses, half the game.
If you start with Metal Man's stage, you basically get to skip the first half of the strategic puzzle. It lets you just steamroll the rest of the roster, completely skewing the learning curve. It's a design flaw, but one that players immediately embraced as a fun exploit.
And then there's the notorious weapon energy exploit. Our sources confirm this was a real bug, or maybe a feature. High-efficiency weapons like the Metal Blade, Bubble Lead, and Quick Boomerang You could use them forever without consuming energy.
If you were fast enough.
Right. If you were fast enough to open and close the weapon select screen, just mashing the start button before the game could register the energy cost.
This start button exploit effectively gives you infinite ammo for your best weapons. It's a clear balance flaw that experienced players quickly learn to rely on for tough sections or speedruns. It's almost necessary knowledge for high-level play.
And this exploit contrasts so sharply with the weapons that were incredibly inefficient. It just shows the huge gap in weapon balancing. Take the time stopper.
Right. Once you activate it, it just runs until your energy is completely gone. You can't attack, and you can't cancel it. It costs almost a full meter for one single use.
Its usefulness is almost entirely for that one specific path, or, like we said, for punishing Quickman. But if you accidentally hit that button at the wrong time, you've just wasted a huge chunk of energy with no way to get it back quickly.
Or consider atomic fire. A max charge shot, a level 3 shot, consumes almost half of the weapon's total energy.
And charging takes forever. And the cruelest part is, if Rockman takes any damage while he's charging, the whole charge is just gone, instantly canceled.
Imagine it. You spend 3 seconds charging, watching that gauge fill up, you're about to unleash it on Woodman, and then a tiny little enemy bullet clips you. And poof, nearly half your weapon energy is gone in an instant. It's just so impractical for any high-pressure situation.
It's high risk, minimal reward. Meanwhile, the Metal Blade is no risk, maximum reward. That imbalance is one of the defining, chaotic, genius characteristics of this game.
And we have to talk about the Wily stage difficulty, specifically the brutal checkpointing. Unlike the first game, where losing to a boss meant you'd restart right outside their door.
In Rockman 2, losing a fight in the Wily Fortress often sent you all the way back to the stage's midpoint.
That is a psychologically devastating penalty. And it stuck around until Rockman 4. Wily stages are long, they're complex, they require perfect resource conservation, and getting kicked back halfway after you just burn E-tanks and weapon energy on a failed boss fight, it's demoralizing.
But it forces you to maintain this incredibly high level of focus for so long. And that punishing structure is a huge part of the legendary difficulty that we all remember, maybe a little too fondly.
Okay, we have to dedicate some serious time to the infamous boom blocks. The moving, disappearing platform sections. These are the series' signature tests of memorization and timing, and Rockman 2 cranked that challenge up to the point of agony.
Heatman stage, that's the one.
Heatman stage, the level design is brilliant, but just brutal. It features these extremely long sequences of vanishing platforms over instant death lava. You have to perfectly memorize the sequence.
And what makes it unique is that the block appearance time actually changes based on your movement speed, which makes it even harder to just memorize by rote. If you hesitate for half a second, you miss the window. I remember just throwing my hands up in frustration the first time I got there.
But again, this is a flaw that's mitigated by the new item system. The game offers you a choice. Spend half an hour mastering that pattern through painful repetition, or burn your precious weapon energy on item 2, the jet platform, and skip the whole agonizing section.
That's brilliant design philosophy, really. It uses the new item system to lessen the difficulty for players who are struggling with the traditional action parts.
But it adds tension too. You use item 2 to get past the blocks, but if you then miss a jump or lose the Heatman, you're back at the midpoint, and that weapon energy you used is just gone forever. The cost of failure is so steep.
And now we move to the parts that truly define the frustration and the technical oversight of Rockman 2, the legendary pain points. And they are almost all centered around the Wily Fortress. These are the details that separate a classic from something that's, flawless.
This is where we have to confront the infamous Boo Beam trap in Wily Stage 4. This room is often cited as the game's single biggest flaw. It's a moment of pure, agonizing design oversight that just grinds the game to a halt.
The setup is almost like a cruel joke. You enter this room, and there are 5 invincible gun turrets. They can only be destroyed with exactly 1 crash bomb each. No other weapons do anything.
And to get through the entire stage, you also have to destroy one specific wall with a crash bomb. So you need a bare minimum of 6 or 7 crash bombs available out of a maximum of 7 that the weapon can hold.
The margin for error is razor thin. You cannot miss.
But the real horror isn't the puzzle itself. It's what happens if you fail. If you miss a shot, or if you restart the stage without enough crash bomb energy, you are completely and totally stuck.
And you're then forced into the most hopelessly tedious process imaginable. Grinding. You have to kill these endlessly spawning little Terry enemies outside the trap, just hoping they drop enough tiny weapon energy pickups to slowly, painfully refill your crash bomb meter.
It completely breaks the pace of the game. The source material explicitly calls this grinding painful and laborious. It punishes the player not with a fun challenge, but with forced boredom. It's entirely dependent on random luck, which is the exact opposite of the game's otherwise fast, rewarding tempo.
It's a situation where if you succeed, you feel brilliant. But if you fail, the punishment isn't try again, it's go do a boring chore for 20 minutes.
Later mobile versions tried to fix it by having the walls drop big weapon energy pickups, but that just created a new problem where you could just spam your way through. It was a fundamental failure in resource design.
And let's talk about the Wily stage energy management as a whole, because it adds so much tension, but it often leads to you having to take a forced game over. Weapon energy does not recover after you clear a Wily stage.
This demands supreme, almost inhuman strategy. You have to plan your weapon usage across 6 separate fortress areas, making sure you have enough ammo for all the items, the mini-bosses, the boo beam trap, and the final boss rush.
Which brings us to the ultimate point of final boss frustration. The alien. The hologram. The absolute last boss can only be harmed by one specific high-risk weapon. Bubble lead.
And here's the cruelest twist, maybe a moment of developer malice. Using any other weapon, including your basic buster, causes the final boss to fully recover its health.
So if you accidentally tap the fire button with the wrong weapon selected, the entire fight just resets.
And since the last stage has no item drops to refill your bubble lead energy, if you run out of that and your E-tanks and you accidentally hit the boss with the buster,
Yeah.
your resources are gone and the boss is perpetually at full health. So what's the only option left?
The only thing you can do is get a game over, intentionally, just to restore all your weapon energy and try again.
But that brings us back to the E-tank flaw. While they're saved by the password, they are lost when you get a game over.
It's this immense psychological pressure. You're forced to choose between sacrificing the precious E-tanks you carefully saved up, or trying to beat an impossible boss with zero ammo. The game over becomes a tactical retreat.
It's a vicious cycle of difficulty designed to make you feel the full weight of every single resource decision you made since the very first stage. That kind of brutal resource management, it just defined the late 80s Famicom action experience.
We also have to mention that you couldn't re-enter cleared Robot Master stages. Once you beat a boss, you could not go back to their stage to farm extra lives or E-tanks, and that restriction stuck around until Rockman 4.
That limits your resource gathering so much. If you clear all 8 stages, but you only have 1 E-tank left, you have to face that entire resource-intensive Wily Fortress with just that 1 tank. There is no going back.
Finally, a minor but, notable step back in presentation.
Yeah.
The boss music. Rockman 2 only has 1 boss battle theme. It's used for all 8 Robot Masters and all the way through the final fight with Wily's alien form.
Which was a clear step back from Rockman 1, which had 2 distinct themes, one for the Robot Masters, one for the Wily stages. The sources suggest this was a memory-constrained thing. They had to prioritize a larger number of total tracks and higher quality sound over having 2 separate boss themes.
It's a really interesting peek into the constraints of the Famicom hardware and that crazy 3-month development. They chose more catchy level tunes over thematic variety in the boss fights.
And it remains the only numbered Rockman title with that single boss theme. It just cements its unique place in the series' sound history, even though the music itself is absolutely incredible.
Okay, let's move to part 5. Legacy, bugs, and global impact. Because even with all these deep, agonizing flaws, the game's success is just undeniable. And we have to start by reiterating that jaw-droppingly short development cycle, 3 months.
It's genuinely incredible. The team, working unofficially, basically as a secret side project, often sleeping at the office, they still produced what so many people consider to be the best entry in the series. The sources say the staff actually found the intense schedule enjoyable, almost like a training camp.
And that quick development is what makes the refinement of the Wily stage boss rush so impressive. In the first game, the rematches were just mid-stage ambushes. They were often really punishing.
But Rockman 2 introduced that dedicated area with the 8 teleporters.
The Dr. Wily teleport system room. Always a moment of high tension and dread when you first saw it. But it allowed you to choose the order of the rematches. which added back that strategic element that was lost when the stage order was fixed.
And crucially, this new boss rush was much fairer. When you defeated a boss, they dropped a large like energy pickup, which helped mitigate the resource drain of fighting 8 bosses back to back.
And that refinement of the boss rush became a defining, beloved feature of the entire series. It standardized that grand final challenge.
Now for the fun stuff. The famous bugs and exploits that really fuel our nostalgia. The first is time matching, the start button exploit we touched on earlier.
Right, the rapid pausing and unpausing of the game, which gives you temporary invincibility after the weapon select screen disappears.
It's a completely unintended feature, born from the way the game renders things. But its utility was immense. You could slow down your falls, you could exploit boss behavior, like making Woodman jump endlessly to the ceiling.
Or, most critically, you could use it to get through impossible swarms of projectiles.
It was an absolute necessity for surviving the Boo Beam Trap's incredibly fast bullets. By mashing start, you could get just enough invincibility frames to dodge them. It was player ingenuity overcoming a broken design element. The flaw created the exploit, and the exploit created a new player skill.
And then there are the super rare glitches, like the delayed scroll glitch. Sometimes if the Famicom's processor was just overloaded, this could happen, and it could warp Rockman into this mashed-up bug Wily stage.
Most of the time, it just crashed the game or you'd get stuck, but the fact that these things could even happen just speaks to how hard the developers were pushing the limits of the hardware during that short, intense sprint. They were squeezing every last drop of performance out of that console.
We also have to acknowledge the global experience. The overseas NES release, Mega Man 2, had an easier normal mode, and that was a significant move by Capcom, acknowledging the difficulty concerns for a broader Western audience.
In normal mode, Rockman's attack power was basically doubled. So a lot of bosses, like Metal Man or Woodman, with the full atomic fire charge, you could beat them instantly. It significantly lowered the barrier to entry.
It made the game far more approachable, though the purists, they still preferred the Japanese difficulty, which was kept as difficult mode overseas. It shows Capcom was already adapting the game's challenge based on market feedback.
And finally, let's talk music. The BGM legacy of Rockman 2 is it's undeniable. Not only is the title screen theme arrangement used in Marvel vs. Capcom, cementing its appeal.
But the Wily Stage 1 BGM became a genuine cultural phenomenon in the early 2000s Japanese online scene. Users added their own lyrics to the melody, and it became the famous song, Omoid wa Akazenmen.
The billion memories. Yeah. And of course, the frustration of Airman, like we said, led to the hugely popular song, Airman ga Balasane. These tracks transcended being just video game music. They became cultural touchstones in Japan, which just reinforced the game's legendary status.
So overall, the consensus, which is reinforced by all the sources and all that cultural impact, it holds firm. Rockman 2 took the shaky foundation of the first game, it refined the system, 8 bosses, E-tanks, fewer cheap deaths, and it established the core formula for the entire Rockman series. The quality was so high that even the PlayStation Port's packaging declared it the series' masterpiece.
We've covered the whole spectrum, haven't we? The masterful structural refinements, the incredible character designs, and the infamous, deeply frustrating flaws.
The Metal Blade exploit, the agonizing Boo Beam Trap, the forced bubble lead requirement for the final boss, the necessary reliance on start button mashing. These details, these moments of nearly broken design, are ironically what we remember most vividly.
The sources confirm it was a chaotic sprint to the finish line, a 3-month miracle.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought. Despite being rushed, despite containing numerous exploits and deeply frustrating flaws like the Boo Beam Trap grind, Rockman 2 is still widely considered the best in the entire series.
Which raises an important question, especially for classic console gaming design. Is true perfection a game with flawlessly balanced weapons and no frustrating sections? Is that actually less engaging than a high-risk, high-reward design? One that includes memorable, challenging, even infuriating elements that force players to innovate and overcome?
Maybe those very flaws, the ones that forced players to invent techniques like time mashing or strategically accept a game over just to refill crucial ammo. Maybe those are what made the game so compelling and legendary. Maybe the frustration, the challenge of overcoming that chaotic design is part of the nostalgic fun we all look back on.
It turned flaws into legends of player ingenuity. And that, in the end, is the true mystery behind Dr. Wily's greatest success.
A deep dive complete. We hope you feel thoroughly informed and maybe just a little nostalgic for those frustrating, brilliant Famicom days.